Are you tired of living in survival mode? Stressed, exhausted, and stuck in cycles that you can't seem to break? My guest today, Melissa, knows that struggle firsthand. After walking through trauma, addiction, and even the tragic loss of her brother, she discovered how somatic healing and nervous system repair can help release what's been stored in the body and open the door to true peace and freedom. If you've ever wondered if healing is really possible, this episode is for you. Still trusting a system that profits from your sickness? Faith Over Pharma is here to flip the script and help you heal the way God designed. If you've been longing for true healing, body, mind, and spirit, imagine what could happen if you stepped away from the noise and gave yourself space to rest, reset, and reconnect. That's exactly what the Rooted Reset Retreat in Costa Rica is all about. Next summer, July 27th through August 1st, 2026, join me for 6 days of soul-deep restoration, nourishing food, Christ-centered community, and powerful practices designed to help you leave survival mode behind and step fully into wholeness. Spots are limited, so if your heart feels a tug, don't wait. Go to susangladstein.com/retreat and reserve your spot today. Today, I'm joined by Melissa. She is a trauma-informed functional health practitioner whose journey of healing was born out of deep personal pain. And after walking through a childhood marked with addiction and abuse, surviving a school shooting at 15, and witnessing the tragic death of her brother at 18, her body carried the weight of unresolved trauma. But instead of accepting sickness and suffering as her story, she pressed into root cause healing, exploring the mind body connection and nervous system regulation. And over the last 20 years, she's transitioned from nursing into functional health, where she now empowers women and their families to heal their body, mind, and spirit. She believes wholeheartedly that healing is always possible, and I can't wait for you to hear her heart today because she is very like-minded in that sense. So thank you so much for being here. And I know that your journey has been marked by obviously trauma. We just talked about some of that, but also incredible transformation. So I would love for you to share how those experiences shaped the work that you do today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Susan. I'm really excited to dive into all of this today. Yeah, so I think my all of those experiences, like they couldn't not define what I do, right? I think I was born to be a healer. Um, the trauma that I experienced goes back at least 5 generations that I'm aware of. So there's like intergenerational trauma being passed down from parent to child for at least 5 generations on both sides of my mother's and my father's side. So I think I was really born I was obviously born into addiction. My parents were both addicted to drugs. Like my very earliest memories were them using drugs like in our kitchen, and we had periods of homelessness and like we lived in a tent at a lake for quite a while when I was like 5. And all of those things ultimately, you know, ending kind of in when my brother died when I was 18, led me to realize my calling, which is to be a healer. Initially thinking that like traditional nursing was the route for that. And so that's what I did. I went into nursing right after my brother's death. That's what I was already in college, just kind of doing general education. Hadn't declared a major. And then 3 weeks after his death, I realized, oh my gosh, I want to be a nurse. And I had already kind of toyed with the idea of like maybe I've always loved children. So I thought like, oh, I'll be a pediatrician. I used to like kind of say that sometimes, but I think I always knew that I would be in healthcare. And I got into, I started going down that path and got into nursing school in my early 20s and became a nurse when I was 24. And kind of quickly realized that like traditional, started my career in a pediatric intensive care unit, in a level one trauma center. So really sick kids, really bad accidents. Thought that like, okay, like, from where I came from and like everything that I went through with my brother, like he was in the ICU for 2 days, like, okay, this is definitely what I want to do. And then in hindsight, now I know that that was like definitely not the right job for me. And my nervous system, I was still so unhealed. Um, and yeah, it was an evolution from there of like realizing that that model, that system, traditional medicine, like doesn't align with my calling on earth. I believe fully in like the power and the necessity of ICUs, ORs, ERs when you need them. But I don't believe that that system is designed to actually like help and keep people well. I think it's actually a sick care system. For acute illness, it's good. For, long-term wellness, it's not the route. So over the last, probably 7 or 8 years, it's kind of been an evolution of like kind of deconstructing everything that I thought my career was going to be and then like turning it into like what I wanted it to be. And that's an ongoing evolution. Um, yeah, it's kind of where I am.
I we have so much in common because like I grew up and I too am I would consider myself a healer and always have been, but I grew up like reading medical encyclopedias, always planned on being a pediatrician. That was just my thing. I went to college as a biology pre-med major and ended up joining the military because I was like I can't afford to pay for school on my own and I didn't want to take out student loans. And that took me on a completely different path, which then later in life, when I was really sick and unwell and yelling at my kids, I rediscovered, health and fitness. And now through coaching, I'm able to help people in a whole new way. But I would say that since I rebranded this podcast, the whole idea of trauma and even our thoughts and the mental side of our health and sickness and all of that has just become so much more. I don't know, everybody's talking about it that I've been talking to, and it's so interesting and something that I feel like isn't as talked about, certainly in the mainstream. I've been to the doctor numerous times and I've never been asked, about my headaches, like how much water do you drink or how much sleep are you getting? And certainly not ever anything about I mean, they'll ask you past medical history, but more like to diagnose you as something rather than like, oh, this could be the source of your trauma. But how would you say that your transition from nursing into more of a functional health perspective changed the way that you view true healing?
Yeah, so much. I mean, I think, as a new grad nurse when I was 15 years ago, I think I thought like that was like you're sick, you go to the doctor and you get like a diagnosis and a prescription. Like that was the answer. That was healing. And it's been a deconstruction of that to the point where now, like, I don't believe in the chemical carousel. Like, I just don't think that that's the answer. I think medicine can sometimes be a bridge, and sometimes we need that, right? Like antidepressants, high blood pressure medications, high cholesterol medications. Don't get me started on any of that, but like, it should be just that. It should be a bridge and getting people off of those medications isn't a conversation that is had. So like when a doctor actually just did a reel about this very topic like a few weeks back because I don't think that I've never when I was 22 I was on 7 different prescription medications and never one time did we have the conversation about like this is what you're going to do to get off of these. In fact, I was told quite the opposite. I was told you're going to be on these forever. And I think from my professional experience and like talking to clients and friends and family members, and their experience is very much the same. That conversation doesn't happen. Like, here's the problem. We need a bridge. Let's help you get, off of these ultimately. It's just like, here's the answer. Here's the answer, period. Like, there is no more conversation. And so like my perspective of health really has shifted completely to the point where like I strongly believe in the power of the mind. I think the one of the biggest scams of our lifetime is this idea that like the body is made up of 1,000 different independent pieces. Like, it's not. It is one complex system made up of 1,000 different parts that all work together in a very divine, purposeful way. And if you change something in one area of that system, you are going to change things in all areas of the system. And like, disconnecting the mind and the body and all the different pieces, like going to your cardiologist for your heart and your gastroenterologist for your gut and your psychologist for your mental health. Like, it's it's a huge disservice to humanity to do that. Um, Again, to be clear, like, I believe in like ICUs, ORs, ERs, penicillin when you need it, but like, I just don't think that that's the way to health.
You're so right because I see that so often with my clients. They'll come in and they'll like either they were told everything was normal, which by the way is a whole other thing that people just don't understand where the normal ranges come from and how if you look back even 20, 30 years ago, things that are considered normal now would have been alarming 30 years ago.
Yep.
That keeps changing, but also in a lot of the areas of science that have not caught up to what we know now, like AMH, for example. So I know that and you talked about this, the mind-body connection, because I do think that disconnecting those is a disservice. But if somebody is listening and they're like, I don't really know what you mean, how would you explain it to someone who's kind of new to this idea or maybe struggled? Because for a lot of us, yes, it is like unlearning what we've been told. And I see that all the time that people will come to me and they'll ask for advice on things or read my labs and I will tell them. And sometimes it's they don't want to get uncomfortable in the process of healing because that process is not easy. It's not
Mhm.
fast, especially if you've got generations of trauma that you're trying to resolve, abuse of the body, because it is pretty fantastic and puts up with a lot of abuse that the world gives us now. But anytime somebody gets just that tinge of uncomfortableness, I find that they just want to run to whatever's the quick and easy fix. And most of the time, that's just putting a band-aid over it with a
Mhm.
pharmaceutical to lessen the uncomfortableness of it all. So I think that there is something to be said about the mind and what you decide you're going to do to heal your body and understanding that it takes time. But what would you say on this, mind body connection topic?
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. Like, people are not like, culturally, societally, like, as a species, we are designed to um avoid discomfort, right? Like, our nervous system, that is like the brain and the spinal cord, is your central nervous system. That's the computer of your body, right? It controls everything. Your heart tells your heart when to beat, your lungs when to breathe, like how to move your arms. Like, there's another branch of that nervous system called the autonomic nervous system, and that's the kind of more abstract, like difficult to understand. And that's kind of like the system in your body that is the internal surveillance system, right? It's constantly scanning you for your environment for danger. And that's the system that gets triggered when you feel any sort of discomfort. And it's the natural, like, inherent job of your nervous system to keep you out of that discomfort. So most people, if they're not aware of it, they will shy away from it. It's like, okay, no, 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 this is uncomfortable. So that must mean it's wrong. So I'm going to go the other way and stay comfortable. And what we have to learn is like to make that conscious decision, because this is all happening like subconsciously under the surface. We have to make a conscious decision and be aware of the fact that everything is uncomfortable when it's new. And if you just push through the discomfort, then it becomes comfortable. Like I think of myself on podcasts. Like I've been on, this is like over 100 podcasts I've been on in the last 2 years. I remember my first podcast 2 years ago. I was like panicked. Like I remember talking to my husband, like I'm canceling. It was like 5 minutes before I was like shaking and sweating. And I was like, I'm like an imposter. I can't do this. Yeah, I've been a nurse for 15 years now, like I have plenty to talk about. But I was so scared, and it was really like becoming aware of that fear and taking action anyway. And then to the point now where it's like super comfortable. Like, is there an element of nervousness? Every time, of course, because you never know what you're gonna get, like with a podcast. Um, but now I'm so much more comfortable. And I think like talking specifically about the mind-body connection is like, as it relates to trauma, is that trauma has this really, or like even just life, not even if you're not even talking about like trauma necessarily, but just life. We're kind of born as like this clean slate, right? We have this like kid, just think about like a 3-year old. This 3-year, like normal average 3-year old has like this like wide-eyed, like the world is their oyster. They can do anything, they can be anything, they have great imaginations, they have fun and ease, and their life is very much centered around them. And as we go through life, trauma, our parents, circumstances, like all of these things start to tell us who we are. And we start to get feedback from the environment. Like maybe it's a parent who has a temper, or maybe it's, physical abuse, or maybe it's not even like that necessarily. Maybe it's like your parents' divorce. And then you go back and forth, and both parents are working and they're trying to be there for you as much as they can, but they're busy because now they're single parenting, and there's so much else that goes into that, right? Like having to pay the bills and, so much else that goes into that. Obviously, it's so complex. But then as a kid, you might start to feel like, well, my parents don't care about me because they're busy. And ultimately, over time, as you feel that over and over and over again, you start to believe in your head that you're not lovable, or you're not worthy, or you're unseen, or unvalued, whatever it is, the narrative that you start to believe. So trauma has this way of like imprinting those beliefs inside of us. And then those beliefs start to be the lens in which we see the world. And, they estimate like 60 to 80 thoughts, 60 to 80,000 thoughts that run through our head on any given day. And when when trauma happens, we tend to have these negative beliefs about ourselves, and 90% of what we think in a day is actually like on happening habitually, like on autopilot. So we have these beliefs, they start to get imprinted into our nervous system, they start to become our identity. And then we see the world through that lens. And then everything that we do, our nervous system keeps us seeing, because what you look for, you will find. So we see those things over and over again. We see evidence of the fact that I am not worthy, I am not loved, people don't value me, I don't, I can't bother anybody, I don't, or whatever it is. Like there's so many different I think the core wound of like everybody is some variation of I'm not worthy. Um, the mind body connection is being able to identify those thoughts that you're having in your mind that are causing physical sensation. So like I use the analogy of like that gut feeling. You know, like everybody knows what that is, like good or bad, right? Like you are walking down a street and there's somebody walking up the street, this, you know, coming to pass you, and you have like hairs stand up on the back of your neck, right? What is that? That's your nervous system sensing danger because it's that internal surveillance system. Or like that gut feeling like I've done something wrong, like that pit of your stomach drops out, like emptiness. Like everybody knows that feeling, right? Or even butterflies in your stomach, like the first kiss, you're anticipating a first kiss or something. Like we all have that feeling. Those are physical manifestations of something that's happening inside of your mind. And so, like, that mind body connection is really like being able to be aware of how your thoughts and what's happening in your brain is actually impacting your physical body. Because I think so, what I see now, like more than ever in this 2025 technological revolution that we are currently living in, is that we are just completely disconnected from our mind and our body. People spend so much time living up here in their head, and they only spend their time living in that 10% of conscious thought. We're not even talking about or thinking about or addressing that 90% that's happening in the subconscious. But we spend all of that time living in our head, and then we're having physical thoughts create a physiological reaction inside of your body, like stress hormones and cortisol, adrenaline, those sorts of things can be pumping through your body just by thinking a thought, because your brain doesn't know the difference between the real thing and a thought. So being aware of that connection is like that is the mind body connection. The bridge between the mind and the body too is the breath. Um so yeah, that's a long answer, but I think you have to have like the big picture and like the 10,000-foot view to
I feel like you're in my head because you just described me and my whole childhood and growing up and the things that I've struggled with. So I'm like, yes, I'm over here nodding the whole time you're talking. But even talking through that, what are some of the physical symptoms that you see most often that are really rooted in unresolved trauma?
Fatigue is like by far the biggest one, and that comes from this like constant, like you, your autonomic nervous system is made up of, most people have heard of like fight or flight. That's your sympathetic nervous system. You also have the other side, which is the parasympathetic, which is rest, digest, and heal. We want to live most of our time in that ventral vagal rest, digest, and heal. But sometimes we move through that phase. That's like connection, joy, purpose, alignment, calm. That's where we feel that is in that ventral vagal parasympathetic nervous system. We move through that into our sympathetic nervous system, and then we can move even farther into that dorsal vagal, which just has to do with the vagus nerve, parasympathetic, which is like shut down or freeze mode. So, like fight, flight, freeze, fawn is the kind of like places you don't want to be. And like that fatigue comes from being in those one or both of the, like sometimes going back and forth between sympathetic fight or flight and then like parasympathetic dorsal vagal, which is shut down or freeze, like going in one or both of those phases for like extended periods of time, because it's exhausting. It's exhausting for your brain, it's exhausting for your body. You're like think of like when you're in sympathetic, when you're in fight or flight and you're quite literally like your body thinks that you are in danger. Like it thinks you are face to face with a tiger, like all the time. And it doesn't know the difference between being face to face with a tiger and being face to face with your boss. Like it doesn't know the difference between, it just asserts that there is danger, and you have chemically the same physiological response inside of your body. You have a surge of adrenaline, a surge of cortisol. You have all these like physical things that happen inside of your body. And in the short term, it's a good thing. But in the long term, that's when we get into trouble. Fatigue is by far the biggest one I see. The other one that I see a lot of is any variation of like chronic physical pain. So like chronic back pain, joint pain, knee pain. Um, and then another big one is insomnia, like inability to sleep. And it's all just coming from trauma that's stored in your nervous system, that is manifesting because we're not addressing the actual like nervous system dysregulation. It's manifesting physically, and that doesn't happen overnight. That's like that happens after like a long time of being in dysregulated states.
Yeah, I think for me, and a lot of times I'll ask my clients questions, and it's such a normal, it's like happened for so long. For me, I didn't realize how bad I felt until I felt good because it was just my normal. And when I ask people like to rate their stress level, it's their normal. So to say that it's, high or whatever feels weird because they don't know anything differently. But can you share an example of how addressing the nervous system brought breakthrough for you where maybe other treatments had failed?
Yeah. Well, so when I was 24, that's when I um first became a nurse, and I was working night shift in a level one trauma center, a pediatric ICU. Like I was on multiple different medications. I was using drugs and alcohol to cope. I was really emotionally volatile and um very like angry at the world. Um, very angry with just like my circumstances and my situation and my past, and obviously like mourning, still the death of my brother, and having flashbacks like from, witnessing his death, and everything that happened subsequently after that. And so when I was 24, I was having like daily, multiple times a day panic attacks. For me, that was the worst part, the panic. And when I was coming out of a panic attack one time, my now husband, then boyfriend, suggested to me that I try meditation. He just reflected back to me. He has no experience in this space whatsoever. He's in construction, but he was just reflecting to me, like, I feel like you're just like really like up here all the time. If you could just like come down a little bit, I feel like you would just feel so much better. And I don't know, like maybe some meditation is something that you could try. Have you ever tried that or something? And I was like, no, but like, what have I got to lose? Right. And knowing what I know now, meditation is not typically like the first recommendation that I have for clients, but for me, like God had it already written in the plan, like that it was gonna work for me, and it did. And for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of calm. And from there, I realized, or I asked, I should say, like, what is this? And how is this possible? And why have I never heard about this before? Why has no doctor ever told me this? No therapist has ever told me this. Like I've been in therapy since I was 10 or 12, and yeah, so it was I from there I learned about like neuroplasticity and the ability of the brain to actually rewire itself, and I just kind of dove like headfirst into learning about nervous system regulation and like meditation, different types of nervous system regulation and somatic work, and I started practicing it every day, and my life dramatically changed. And then there was some couple other milestones from there. Like once I found Jesus Christ when I was 30, so that was 6 years later. Um, and then from there, I really started to evaluate like my own identity and my own like thoughts and beliefs about who I was. And that all changed when I became a believer. Um, I like to say when Jesus found me, because that's really like what it was. And my whole life just like, and then I realized like I was not my past. I like my past obviously is there, but like I developed like a healthy detachment from it where it didn't actually define who I am. It's just a part of my past. And I have like the ability now to be able to talk about it without like feeling like I'm reliving it. Um, yeah. And it's never end. It's like still, it's an evolution.
I that's super powerful. And I think like I can think back to whenever I was sort of, at my most stressed state and discovering, health and fitness and all of that. And the idea of meditation to me was extremely overwhelming because I could not quiet my mind. It just stressed me out even more. So it's funny that you say that.
Yeah.
Well, it's not normally where I would say to go, but like,
Yep.
yay that the Lord knew what was going to speak to you, at least to bring you into a point where you're able to be more open-minded. Because I think when we're, chronically stressed, chronically in pain, it's hard to think of anything else but that and what's in front of you, to even be
Oh, for
open-minded
sure.
to try something else. Because I always felt like I was just always running kind of in defensive mode. And until I could switch to be more in an offensive mode where I was more in control, that things outside of now, not to say we can control everything that's going on in our world, but there was a lot of things that I was just letting happen to me instead of taking charge. Like, for example, just getting up earlier before my kids and having quiet time to myself to process, to be in quiet before the house awoke and got crazy was like hugely life changing for me. And even just organizing our schedules so that it wasn't, you know, if we actually I implemented chore charts because instead of like micromanaging and being on my kid's case for not getting things done, it was a very simple like, hey, did you look at the list? What needs to be done? And then that was that. So it took some of the stress off of me as far as what needed to get done in the mornings. But I know that for a lot of us, we've talked about this, like trauma is often stored in the body. And you even mentioned somatic work. What does that look like in practice? And how could it help somebody maybe listening to this podcast release something that they've been holding on to?
Yeah, so somatic, soma just literally means body. So somatic work is just anything that highlights the mind-body connection. And really that goes that like brings you from your thinking brain into your feeling brain, which is like just recognizing what you're feeling inside of your body. So, like, I've been asked before, like, can anything be somatic? And I'm like, I kind of think so. Like, as long as you're like mindful and aware of what you're feeling inside of your body, like, you could, like, so walking is a somatic movement. Um, Sitting peacefully in a chair, just paying attention to your thoughts and your like sensations in your body can be somatic work. Um, the like I said, like the bridge between the mind and the body is the breath. And so I think when you become aware of your breath, that is becoming aware of your body and like establishing that mind body connection, just thinking like you can change your physiology like so much just from your breath. And so that's the first like thing that I always go to with clients who are feeling like, clients that come to me, they're new, clients, they're super stressed, super overwhelmed, have all this trauma. They spend, 100% of their life like in their mind, and they have all these, things that they have to do. They're overwhelmed, overtouched, overstimulated, all of the things, tapping into your breath. And this isn't like, you have to sit on a pillow in a corner with nothing in it away from your kids for 30 minutes or an hour. Like, that's not what this is. Like, 3 deep breaths, like, will change your life. Just baby steps.
Yes, baby steps for sure. And I appreciate that you mentioned that because I can remember when my life was so chaotic. I mean, even the idea of doing something good like exercise on a regular basis seemed so far out of reach for me because it was one more thing that I did not have the energy for. And it really wasn't until much later that I even discovered the breath and taking 3 deep breaths. But it's something that I've used on my now 4-year-old when she was 2 and couldn't regulate her nervous system or whatever. We would take deep breaths, and you could physically see it change for her. And to the point where if I was stressed out or she could tell I needed it, she would do that to me, where she would be like, okay, take a deep breath. And if you practice that, like literally it just changes everything. I know
Yeah.
when I've like sat in traffic or I'm running late for something and everything feels so much harder when you're in that state, right? Just to take a moment to take a few deep breaths, it really does make a big difference. And obviously I host retreats in Costa Rica, and it's kind of a hard sell for women who are always pouring into everybody else that they are often last on their to-do list. Like, hey, spend this money and come away with me to Costa Rica. But that's a lot of the things that we sort of practice is getting away, getting clear. But how do you bring that back and implement it into your real life? That's the part that's the magic of it. But for
Yeah, totally.
somebody who feels like they're stuck in survival mode, besides breath work, is there something that you would also recommend that they could kind of just start with if that feels overwhelming?
Yeah. Yeah. So, no matter what you're trying to change, awareness is the first step always. You can't change something that you are not aware of. So I think the body piece of it, the breath piece of it is so important. And like I recommend like this doesn't have to be like we're all busy, we're all overstimulated, all of those things, but like it doesn't have to be like a 30, 60 minute like peaceful, like I'm sitting like Rafiki with my legs crossed in like a chair, like it doesn't have to be like that. You can literally do it in the car. You can literally do it with your kids right next to you. In fact, I recommend doing it with your kids right next to you because not only are you teaching them how to do things to regulate their own nervous system, but you're actually modeling self-care, which is going to be hugely beneficial for them in the long run. That's the body piece of it. And like I say, set your alarm for 3 times a day. Like we all have these ridiculous pocket computers with us everywhere we go. So don't tell me you don't have it. Put an alarm in your phone 3 times a day. And you're going to have to force yourself to stop what you're doing when your alarm goes off and just stop what you're doing where you are. And if you can, if it's safe, if you're not driving, close your eyes, put your hands over your body, over your heart or over your abdomen. I like to do one on each, one hand over my heart, one hand over my abdomen, and just take 3 deep breaths. That's it. 3 times a day, 3 deep breaths. And then you can go on with the rest of your day. But the second piece of it is the mind piece. And I think, like you said, you can't control like what happens to you. I do agree with that. You can't control what happens to you, but you can control your perspective about what happens to you. So Brooke Castillo developed the model, which is the idea of like your circumstances in your life are neutral. Like they are what they are. They are not positive or negative. They can be debated in the court of law. Like they just are. We assign value to those things. So we have thoughts about our circumstances, and then that drives physical feelings inside of our bodies. And then that drives our reactions, inactions, or inactions. And then that gets us our results. So, like, really going back to the beginning and analyzing most people think that we need to change our life at the level of our circumstances or at the level of our action. Both are incorrect. We actually change our life by changing our thoughts and feelings. So I use the example of my brother because I tell that story, people understand it, they can resonate with loss and grief. Like my brother died. That is a circumstance, right? Like it is not positive or negative. It has no value. It just is a fact, right? It can be debated in the court of law. Now, I can think about that, my brother died, my life is ruined, how will I ever go on? This is terrible. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And what that's going to do is generate a physical feeling of defeat, depression, hopelessness, helplessness, like disempowerment, right? I'm going to feel all those things physically. And what it's going to do is drive probably a whole lot of inaction on my part. Like, I'm probably not going to get up and go to the gym. I'm probably not going to like chase my dreams and like, get on podcasts and like build my dream business. Like, I'm not going to do those things. And what I'm going to get as a result of that is like more feeling like despair, depression. Like, I'll probably start having physical manifestations. I'll sleep like crap. I'll feel like crap. Like, it will be terrible, right? On the other hand, if you go back to the beginning, circumstance, my brother died. That's still the circumstance. My thought about that is this happened to because it's part of my journey, right? It's part of my plan. It's part of God's will for my life, right? He's already gone before me. I know Romans 8:28 says God works all things for the good of those who love him. So he did not cause my brother to die, but like he are like human will and all that like makes it complicated, right? Like he already knew he was going to die. And that was part of my journey was my brother's death. And that thought about that, and like I still miss him. Like those two things can be true at the same time, right? And not like I'm thinking like, oh, this is the best thing that ever happened to me. And like, I'm so glad that he died. Like, that's not true. But like, the thought is that this happened for a purpose. And this can be something good. The feeling that generates from that thought is one of empowerment and possibility and excitement, right? That generates like, oh my gosh, like this did happen for a reason, and I can make something good out of this, which in turn makes me take action. And I'm putting myself out there and I'm sharing my testimony and I'm empowering other women to heal themselves. And that's gratifying for me and healing for me just in and of itself. And the result is like just exponential, like healing for me, healing for other people. Like the ripple is like endless. I'm helping people change like generations, you know? So really analyzing, becoming aware and analyzing your thoughts and feelings about all of your circumstances. You cannot control the circumstance, but you can control what you think about that circumstance.
Man, I feel like that's a mic drop because I would say that I was very similar. My dad committed suicide when I was 14. And at that time, as a 14-year-old girl who thought my dad, hung the moon, but nobody ever talked about his mental illness, I decided at 14, although I had lots of guilt and things that, I didn't deal with till later, but I definitely learned at a young age that our days are numbered, never to miss the opportunity to tell someone that you love them. Because I
Mhm.
felt like I didn't get to say goodbye and all of it because it happened so suddenly that I was going to use that moving forward to really seize each day like it could be my last and to love the people around me as if it was my last opportunity. So, like at 14, that was what I took from that experience. Now, that's not to say I didn't have a lot of other things, but it definitely changed my perspective in a more positive way that now, as a mother and whatever, I can utilize that to change a lot of the things that could have gone completely differently. But if someone is listening to this today and they feel like their trauma is too big or their body is too broken to ever fully heal, what encouragement would you give to them?
I would say that that's all lies from the pit of hell. And that's not true. Healing is always, 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 always possible. Always. It doesn't matter the story, it doesn't matter the diagnosis, it doesn't matter your past or your reality right now. Like None of that matters. Healing is always possible. You are divinely created to heal. You don't have to think about it. When you cut your hand, you don't have to think about it. It just heals on its own. You don't have to tell it to do anything. Like your body is literally created to heal, and it's always possible.
Man, I'm like tearing up because I know that there's someone who's listening to this that desperately needed to hear those words, and someone's not pouring into them in that way. So thank you for sharing that. If someone is like, oh my gosh, I just love what you're saying and I want to reach out to you or connect with you, how can they find you?
My website is holistichealthbymelissa.com. And then you can find me on all social media platforms, Holistic Health by Melissa. I have a podcast, Holistic Health with Melissa. And then I host, there's lots of free stuff on my website, masterclasses, PDFs, resources. And then I host a quarterly free 3-day mind body healing workshop. The next one's coming up October 13th, 14th, and 15th. It's totally free, like 60 to 90 minutes. You get a ton of information. I'll teach you like step by step what I did, how to heal your mind, body, and spirit, take control of your thoughts, regulate your nervous system, and heal your body.
Amazing. And thank you so much for taking the time. Before we jump off, is there anything else that you wanted to tell people listening today?
Well, I think just reiterating that healing is always possible. Like you are never too far gone. There is never, like God's grace is always there, and his will for you is to feel whole and healed and complete, and it's always available to you. Sometimes I think like we have to get out of our own ways, right? Like we have to make the decision that like this is going to work because I am not accepting any less. And like there's always going to be a reason why like tomorrow I'll do it, or maybe I'll do it next month or the first of the year, or can't right now. Like there's always going to be a reason why not to. But I'm telling you right now, like you can't afford anymore to not do it. Like you can't afford to not do it. Your kids, they don't listen to what you say, they watch what you do. So if you are not taking care of yourself, it doesn't matter how much you tell them to take care of themselves, they're not going to do it if you're not doing it. And it stops with you. The generational trauma, the like belittling ourselves, thinking we're not worthy, the, limiting beliefs and the identity suppressing beliefs, it stops with you.
So good. Thank you so much for taking the time to pour into this audience and for sharing the love and light because you're so right. Like, honestly, the devil wants nothing more than you to doubt God's ability to heal you, for you to doubt that he loves you. Like, the only power that the devil has is those fears and doubts. And so I just say, tell the devil you ain't got time for that because it's not true. Like if you read the word, none of that is true. And so thank you so much for sharing all of that. I appreciate you so much, and I'll make sure that all the ways to connect with you is in the show notes as well. But thanks again for being here.
Thanks for having me. It was a blast.
Thanks for hanging out with me on this episode of Faith Over Pharma. If something stirred in you today, share this with a friend who's ready to stop outsourcing their health and start healing the way God designed. And if you're ready to stop chasing symptoms and start healing at the root, head over to faithoverpharma.org to grab tools, join the movement, or book a free call. Until next time, keep questioning the narrative, protecting your peace, and walking in the truth that your body was made to heal.